feminism idea is that the women nowadays are expected higher results and to perform more, including being feminine, meaning providing future generation, and including working and including education. So as the previous lady in the video spoke, that we can have it all, but not at the same time. That's the point that I agree to, because we are now expected to do much more things that we are pretty much are capable of as a creature, as a human being. And also I want to agree with Markian about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it all depends on the physical ability of one person. We can't expect a lady to do the very same work at the railway station as the previous lady spoke. So negative outcome is that we are expected to do more, that we can physically stand as a weaker, physically weaker gender in general.
It's interesting. Feminism was a response to the expectations of society pushing women down. And now, because of feminism, the good thing is women have choice, and yet now, the paradox is there's not enough time to do. Now, you must be this perfect woman in the household, but also this perfect woman at work.
And look good both times.
More pressure on everybody, please, and then we'll go to Yaroslav.
One more idea. I could say that we must not pay too much attention for this word feminism. If you go to a village around everywhere, probably not too many people just know what does it mean.
I'm laughing just thinking about it. In Babency.
They are living like in nature. They have their own house and everything around.
I gave this presentation in Potik. It was great. No.
And doing just, and I could say that it's wrong idea, because, for example, in family, of course, it's more for the big cities. It's overcrowded. The relationship got to be just working place, and so of course it's this strict line like feminism, because women would like to have his own, just be such, keep such a strong way like men could, but it's just more for big cities. But and I could say, for example, what can I do? If I see my wife just sleep at the moment, I could cook breakfast, and also if I have a time, I could care about my granddaughter and son, and I could do everything. But something, of course, we could share, but we did not mention. You must do, or you have to. I know I can do it better. I do it, and wife at times, my wife could do. Oh, it's very hard work. You did it. How did? Oh, I saw you. You don't make a good tune onto this work. I did it instead of. It's just a normal life, but just it's.
Why doesn't she come to the English club? Why do you do this hard work?
It just.
An interesting perspective. Yeah, this word isn't like, even if we're doing the right thing, sometimes it's not part of our daily lives. We can still be human beings and love each other, and when you care about somebody, you can still do the right thing without referencing like a philosophy book. Like, good point, very good point. And in the villages, I can tell you, like, it's different. People do what they have to do to take care of each other. It's a different sort of lifestyle. Feminism is fundamentally industrial. It's partially a response to the Industrial Revolution. It's fundamentally, in some ways, Marxist, and it's a response to the way that industry works. Now, we have twice as many workers, right? So it's something to think about. I think we have more on this. Yaroslava.
Well, I wanted to add that these higher expectations of women nowadays come from the distortion of the initial idea of feminism. And that's what happened in the Soviet Union. So
Okay, we
it's
got
not,
back to that. Good.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's not a thing like Soviet feminism is not a thing, because it's not like you were given a choice to become a homemaker or to work at a steel factory. You were supposed to do all that. And yeah, in the Soviet Union, the idea of a traditional family and traditional mother role, mother figure was very strong. And also I wanted to add that biological capabilities and gender roles are different things. Gender roles are prescribed by society. And Oksana's point seemed a little contradictory to me, because before she said that women are incapable to be equal to men in their capabilities, but then later she said that now women got too strong, stronger than men. So, yeah. And referring to Markian's idea, I think...
You agree? Yeah?
No. I can't imagine a situation.
Oh,
where
she's my hater, by the way. First.
So,
First of all, she's my hater, and then you continue. Yeah.
so yeah, it's not like some roles in life are not supposed to be prescribed according to your abilities and physical appearances, or like how strong you are and stuff like that, but rather for your choices. You become who you want to be, and that's it.
It's a long story.
Okay. Two things. Yeah, and you go in 1 second, but I want to talk about this Soviet feminism thing one more time, because it's super interesting. So, a big thing of Soviet propaganda following the Second World War, and earlier as well, but especially during the Cold War, was all of the racism and the sexism and the isms that happened in America, right? Some of you remember this, right? You would have seen propaganda videos from like the ghettos in Chicago or in Harlem in New York City, like, oh, and you know, the oppressed people and this and that, and women as well. Look how they treat their women. Women aren't allowed to do this, that, and the other thing. But what Yaroslava mentioned, the element of choice is the key difference in the real feminism that we're talking about here. So when you're living in a command economy, it's an authoritarian system. I don't quite think that Soviet feminism passes the muster. I just watched a movie. It's called The Battle for Sevastopol. I don't know if you've heard of this. And it's about a Soviet sniper who was actually Ukrainian, Lyudmila Pavlichenko, right?
Yeah.
And they make this whole deal about how, you know, she was supposed to go and marry the doctor, and then she was so bright, but she wanted to fight in the war, and this and that. I mean, that's emblematic, right, of the type of, I guess, feminist icon produced by that system. So he made a good point, but I wanted to differentiate. Yeah, because I think that's a common thing that people say, is that, oh, the Soviets figured out feminism, or the Soviets figured out this and that. Well, it's just a little different, maybe. To your point.
Yeah. So according to the Ukrainian constitution, we have equal rights, men and women. And even this year, women, they are allowed to join military colleges.
Right.
So, even from, but from the biological point of view, we have different minds. I mean, in head, if different psychology. For example, for driver racer,
Yeah.
in some critical situation, women usually fall in panic and do it according to their emotion, not
Okay,
it's
good.
not rational.
Good.
But from the other point, in Japan, electronic companies
Yeah.
like Sony and so on, they hired just young girls to produce some electronics because
the
others, yes, because they have very high sensitivity in their fingers. So
okay.
But it's a matter of
others
habit.
can't do it this work. So it's just impossible to make
Okay.
the
So this
same.
is back to Markian's argument, which is not really trying to make a statement about gender. He's just saying, well, people do what they have the capacity to do. It's not about choice. Go.
My friend was almost 3 years at army
Yeah.
in East, and she was a soldier, but she did what she could help them because she professional journalist and she was working with all journalists like from whole world, which was coming to like make interview the soldiers and everything.
Right.
And she was like normal soldiers, she got a weapon and everything, but she still could do what she do really good, and she even smaller than me. She like 1 meter and 55 centimeters or something. She looked more like a child, but she could carry all these equipment and like weapon and everything, and still be a woman and be professionalist and help maybe even sometimes better than our politicals. So
The bar keeps moving on this in America too. First, like 20 years ago, it's like, oh, women, they'll never serve in the combat arms. So women have been serving in the American military in combat arms for a while now. Women, well, they can serve in the combat arms. They're helicopter gunners now. They're basic infantry, but they'll never be special forces now. The first 4, I think it was 4 or 5, 4 women passed U.S. Army Ranger selection. So we have women in the special forces now. Based upon, for what it's worth, Marquion's qualifications, which is these women were capable of passing the special forces courses and now they're able. But there's a difference. What if those women weren't allowed just on the basis of gender? So we can't just say, like Marquion says, well, people are capable, they're capable, but there are also political, right, reasons that women are blocked from doing things. That's what feminism is also addressing.
Not even political, but even church. So
Oh,
women
religious,
cannot conduct church services. I've never had that women. Only one woman in the world can conduct church services, like in Australia. So it's ridiculous. I don't know. But what I want to
It's ridiculous.
what I want to mention
Take a
that
stand,
we,
Marquion.
besides we don't have to be prejudiced to men or women, but we don't have to exaggerate. So
You don't
no
have to
prejudice,
exaggerate. Okay.
no exaggeration, and no prejudice.
Okay.
Okay, because if you exaggerate, for example, there are some ridiculous things. Instead of history, let's change history for hair story. Yes, there are such cases. Yes, so let's be equal. Yes. Or it doesn't matter where a man is stupid or a woman is stupid, it has to be like equal rights. So equal rights, 50% of men and 50% of women in that organization. Yes, it's really weird. What if there are 60% like more intelligent men and 40% like more stupid women, or maybe more intelligent women than 60% of the intelligent women, more than 40% of intelligent men. And you have to, in some organization, you have to stick to this rule, 50/50. It's unbelievable.
Gotcha. You have a question for me or for Marquion?
Actually, no, I have a question for you.
What?
Because we are from two different cultures. You were from a culture that does more, like, focuses more on family roles.
Yeah,
You're
my
Latin, so
culture
what's
is
your
more.
take on it?
My take is, well, I'm also Cuban American, but really, I mean, but Cuban culture is more like Ukrainian culture. However, I think to a degree this is true. I would strongly describe Cuban families as secret matriarchies. Yes, I believe that maybe Ukrainian as well, because the Latin American abuela is like the god, and what abuela does for the family is she's just the organizing principle. She's a caregiver, so it's a matriarch, but in a caregiver role. Her influence, she rules by influence, maybe a little fear, but mostly by influence and by care and by love, and it's kind of a beautiful thing, in my opinion. I think Ukraine is exactly the same. I have the best relationships with Babusias, they're my favorite people. And they love me too. Because I like their care, I'm like, oh, this is familiar. Yes, you can feed me. Yes, this is good. Yes, so anyway. Does that answer the question? Yeah, it's more like Ukrainian. Yeah.
What about Didusia?
Didus is like, hey, you have Hodoka with Didus, and it's the same. And it's the same, I think, in Cuban culture. You play dominoes with abuelo, and it's like, okay, like, he's a cool guy. I'll say this: if you think that stereotypically, if you were to say that maybe like Ukrainian men do less in the household, I would say that also Latino men do less in the household, and women work hard. You know, in Latin cultures, that this is stereotyping. I shouldn't do this, but Yeah, the women, like you describe in Ukrainian culture,
Yeah.
hard workers. Hard workers. Anyway.
It
But yeah,
depends
it's
on
a
the
very
body
gender
shape.
role heavy culture, just like Ukraine. Mark, yeah.
It depends on the body shape of a woman and the man.
The body shape.
Yes.
I'm
If
not
a
gonna
woman
crack
is
it up.
stronger, yes,
Okay.
fatter than the man, so the man has no chance.
If the woman is better with a plow. That's a good point. Okay. Yeah. Where do we go from there? That kind of train of thought. We'll move on. Okay, good. Do I want to put this video? I'm not sure. Yeah, we'll do this real quick. Let me see, where are we going? I will skip that. Okay, yeah, we're going to do this one. So, leadership. And I think we had anticipated the point. How do we see women as leaders? We've talked about it a little bit. I wrote these. This is not exhaustive. Female leaders, and I have my two examples. I don't know why Anne of Kiev and Eleanor Roosevelt. They're both interesting because they were both famous partially because of their husbands, obviously, and married to Henry, and Eleanor married to Franklin Delano. But they were very influential in this kind of way that I was just describing, this matriarchal, sort of caring, soft sort of power approach. And they're models of leadership in their own right. Enough of that. Female leaders, how are they perceived? A challenge that female leaders often face is they're perceived as both too emotional. They're too emotional, but at the same time, they're too strong. Why are you such a B word? Why are you so strong? So it's this kind of paradoxical situation. I think you seem to be understanding what I'm saying. And then another thing, female leaders are frequently presented questions about family life which would not be asked of men in the same situation. I think we can all understand that. I don't think that you'd ask, let's say a 35-year-old man who comes in to interview for a job. I mean, I don't think it would be on your radar whether he was single or married at all, generally speaking, very generally. It would just be about the qualifications, but employers are often concerned about when a woman might start a family because of the biological differences or things like this, the maternity leave situation. And then generally this is about leadership, but this is about electoral challenges. Women sometimes have a harder time seeking office generally, but we're going to talk about that. So let's play this video and then we'll get a response. Yeah, that's good.
I was in my late 20s. I was single. I was skinny.
So
I had a lot of blonde hair.
these are
I was not what you were supposed to
American
be. You were running.
Congress people. Maybe we have some senators in here, I think Gillibrand, who describe their experiences as obviously very high-level political leaders in America.
I was in my late 20s. I was single. I was skinny. I had a lot of blonde hair. I was not what you were supposed to be if you were running for a serious office.
It was my first race in 1972. And at that time I was a young mother, and every time I knocked on doors, people would say, "How could you leave your children?"
When I ran for leadership, the question was, who said she could run? I'm amused by that because that only stirred me on more.
With the extraordinary challenges that we will not only need to work in diligent cooperation and collaboration, but we will need to test our own imagination.
In my first congressional race, my opponent first started calling me just a pretty face, implying that I wasn't qualified for the job. But then, when he chose to do a mailer of me, he used the least attractive picture he could find. He used this technique of demeaning women by their appearance.
Sexual harassment in the Missouri legislature for me was a little bit like brushing my teeth every day. There was something said, a joke made, an inappropriate comment made, an awful lot. The Speaker of the House, when I asked him at the dais, in the chamber, what advice he would have for me about helping me get my first bill out of committee, he looked at me and kind of laughed and said, "Did you bring your knee pads?"
I had lost a lot of weight, and one of my colleagues comes up from behind and grabs my waist and said, "Don't get too skinny, I like my girls chubby."
There's a pecking order from the origins of our country to now that certain men would have certain jobs, and they all agreed on what the sequence would be, and then we got in line and said, "Hold on, we've been waiting over 200 years."
And I move that Hillary Clinton be selected as the nominee of the Democratic Party for President of the United States.
it has gotten lost, the historic nature of this candidacy.
Having a woman aspire to that top job, to run a strong campaign for that job, is extraordinarily important.
There's no room in America for prejudice. You cannot broad brush a whole group of people, whether it's because of their religion or their skin color or their gender. When we do that, we exclude so much talent. And I've never believed women are better. I believe we're equal.
Okay. Any reactions to that?
I was in my late,
Okay, yeah. This might be another situation where people don't want to talk, so that's understandable. Okay. What are your perceptions of women in high leadership roles? Right now we have a very high-profile female political leader in Ukraine running for president. Talking about her. What are the unique challenges faced by female leaders? And the other thing, which I think is more interesting, are women able to lead as effectively as men, or are they too emotional, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, different in character? Because
Percentage of women who can lead, maybe 10-20%.
which is less than men.
But lesser than maybe it's a little bit less because more emotional character and so on. But men more strict in this as a leadership.
As a sidebar to this, do you think that if it were true that women were more emotional as leaders, would this necessarily be a bad thing? But also continue. Yes, thank you.
They can't be emotional all the period of stress or something. I believe that women in some situation, they are too emotional at the beginning, just for a few minutes, and then they stop and start thinking. And women in that case have one more advantage. They have highly developed intuition, and they trust more their gut feelings, and on that position, their decisions probably can be more correct because they base them on their inner feelings. I
Which,
think so.
although they can't quantify them, but it's a better gut decision than a man's gut decision.
I think so.
Okay.
It's naturally that they have more developed intuition.
Let's go to Diana first.
I am a little bit confused why being emotional is considered as a negative quality in order to be a
It's a
leader.
question worth asking. Yeah.
Well, we are all emotional, and men are just as emotional as women are. They just are better at hiding that. Like their facial expressions are less visible, I'd say, which is not also definitely true because there are different people, different facial expressions, right? And I think it's not a bad thing to be an emotional leader. It brings up some fun, I don't know, some colors to the conversation, I don't know. That's the thing is that I don't understand why being emotional is considered to be bad in the situation of being a leader, a political leader, or any other case.
The common example given for why a woman shouldn't be president in the United States, for example, is this the right person to make the decision on when we should push the button? To which I respond, just don't push the button. But also, that's the idea, is that a woman in a war situation, in a time of crisis, in a time where a tough decision was being made and people will die, she will be too sensitive and she will not be willing to kill. I don't think this is true, just from my lived experience. But
Have you ever saw a movie about Ivano-Frankivsk?
I have, The Iron Lady.
Yeah.
Oh, we should watch that. Yeah.
And it's exactly about war and
Yes, I agree.
Yes.
Another
Sink it.
texture.
Yeah, I think in stressful and crisis situations, everybody's emotional regardless of their gender and sex. And Alexei said that in a car accident, women behave more emotionally than men. But I think if you're crashing a tree, like regardless who the driver is, you'd be scared like just the same. And I also agree that being emotional is not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. And the emotional capability or something it directly depends on how we raise people. So if men are less emotional and women are more emotional, maybe it's because we raised them wrong. So
I mean, anecdotally, I mean, our president, former President George Bush II, the son, was one of the more like visibly emotional presidents we've ever had. He cried multiple times during speeches on stage. He's a crier. He's a sensitive man. He also launched one of the most destructive wars that America has had since the Vietnam War. So
I mean the critical situation that takes just second to make decision.
okay, all right.
So in this situation,
So you're saying that lag time where
emotional.
so don't think about emotions.
Goes to crisis.
So if you're going to launch nuclear weapons at someone, you shouldn't think about emotions. Just launch them. Can't wait. Let's do it.
But before press the button, you have some minutes at least,
in
or
those
hours,
seconds,
not seconds.
Not seconds.
yeah, in those seconds in a car accident, for example, you still don't do things rationally. Like you're sitting there and thinking, okay, maybe I will like swerve or something, and
You should
you
make
just,
decision to prevent that accident.
Oh,
Yeah.
proprioception. Men might be better at that scientifically. Okay.
Touching on that, I actually I don't really like the question that you're asking because women able to lead as effectively as men, like it should be.
Are
which-
men
Women, yeah, you know what I mean. But anyways, like I think that the question should be who is more capable and more like prepared, and who is the best choice for that? Because not even touching on
It's your
our,
moment, Markia.
not even touching on our presidential election because it was male versus female. We have a male president right now who is notoriously emotional. I mean, if you check his Twitter feed in the age of social media, like we know what Trump is thinking before he even wakes up.
Yeah.
And he is not a very, like he's known for being an irrational thinker, making.
I think there's a problem in the what we think of when we think of the word emotional. Like, I think a lot of people that like Trump don't think he's emotional. They think he's
passionate.
They think he's passionate and strong.
Yeah.
He's the president. But that aside, yeah, that's a question. Like, what is emotional, right? Like, is emotional taking a long time to consider whether you should drop a guided missile on a building, or is emotional this thing in the morning when he's in bed waking up? I don't know. So
Not emotion. Not only we just speaking concerning emotions. It's not the main, because man's nature just to be leader, to achieve some group, to be on first position. And as history said, man just all the time in struggle with each one for first position, for better position. But for woman's nature, women's nature just much more to care about children, to care about husband and so on. But of course it's not there are a lot of women who
are
like
not
to be leadership, but
right.
mainly just main things.
So the question then is that biological or cultural?
Biological.
So it's biological.
Just the nature of man.
Biological or deep psychological. So it can't be fixed by cultural changes.
Not only biological. If you not say biological, it's like from different perspectives. I mean, biological, the way you were raised, the habitual, your habits, you can practice, you
But
can
it's
develop
important to
this
know
habit,
how much
not
is
only biological.
This is a wrap. Okay. What else we got, guys? Let's move on because we're almost out of time. I want to get to this. Poetry, writers and activists. We'll stop on this. You know who that is?
No,
That's you.
Angelina Jolie,
Kind of looks like it, right?
it looks like Angelina. Oh, you got glasses.
And Maya Angelou.
Yeah.
Okay, let's. I just want to listen to this.
I think Tika was worse. Like she was not so.
I actually, the plan was for someone to read
You
these
may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted eyes. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust. All right.
Thanks for coming.
Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Just because I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weak